Welcome to We and Lewes, a podcast dedicated to celebrating the remarkable, creative, and energetic people who live in Lewes and are helping our community forge a collective soul as appealing as it is unique. These are their stories in their words. They are the we in Lewes. I'm your host, Kevin McGinnis. Our guest today is Ron Collins, what we in the legal world call a lawyer's lawyer. If I shared his entire biography, it would take up the entire show, so I'll just provide some highlights. Ron graduated from the Loyola Law School in L.A., clerked for the Oregon Supreme Court, was a judicial fellow under Supreme Court Chief Justice Warren Burger, and taught law at Syracuse, George Washington University, and the University of Washington, and he's won countless legal awards. A prolific writer, he's considered an expert on law, freedom of speech, and justice in the United States. He has authored or co-authored over 13 books, ranging from The Fundamental Homes, that's Oliver Wendell, not Sherlock, to The Trials of Lenny Bruce, to The Death of Discourse. His most recent book, Tragedy on Trial, the story of the infamous Emmett Till murder trial, has been called long overdue and an indispensable account. Here in Lewes, among other things, he was co-founder of the History Book Festival and is the Lewes Public Library's distinguished lecturer. Today, in so-called retirement, Ron's busier than when he was a law professor. Today's episode is brought to you by the Lewes Chamber of Commerce, which was organized in April 1975 to advance the general welfare and prosperity of the Lewes area. Good Lord, that's been 50 years. Congratulations to Betsy and her team. Every week, it seems the Chamber is involved in something around town. They've organized or supported events ranging from the Lewes British Motor Show to the Lewes Garden Tour to the Lewes Tulip Celebration to this podcast. And if you're visiting, the Chamber's office at the historic Fisher Martin House at 120 Kings Highway basically doubles as a visitor center. Just don't try to use the stairs. Ron, welcome to the podcast. Rick.
What a joy it is to be with you. Thank you for having me.
As a lawyer, I have to ask this question. What's it like providing legal analysis or commentary to a justice of a state or the Supreme Court? Has to be intimidating.
Well, as we say in law, counsel assuming facts not in evidence. So lawyers will tell you that law professors aren't real lawyers. You know, we deal in theory and what have you. So the vast majority of my career has been, as an educator, not someone litigating. I've worked with a lot of appellate lawyers, and I've watched, lawyers. And these days, both in the state Supreme Court and certainly in the U.S. Supreme Court and elsewhere, you really have to be on top of your game. And if you're a show horse, that may be good in a trial court, but it certainly doesn't work in an appellate level. And most of my work recently is not me working in court, but me working with appellate lawyers on various things. But like I said, the vast majority of my career, I did start off working with legal aid, and I did work with a Nader group, the Center for Science and the Public Interest in Washington, D.C. But the vast majority of my career has been as a law professor and a writer.
But tell us about that first day you walked in the Oregon State Supreme Court with one of the great jurors of all time, Hans Lindy. Mm-hmm. And was there anything going on in your mind about, oh, God?
Yeah, well, I had been told, Justice Hans Lindy, Linde, one of the great Supreme Court justices, state Supreme Court justices, and what an intellect. It was the smartest, one of the smartest minds I've ever met. And after 2 days, I thought, I'm in over my head. It was like, how did I get her and how do I get out? And I called up one of his former clerks, and she laughed, and she says, I know why you're calling. You just don't know how you're going to make it until tomorrow. And it was the beginning of a humbling but very rewarding educational experience. And to study and be a mentor or to be a clerk to someone of that stature is an enormous honor. And like with so many other people, whatever success I've had in life and whatever dots have been connected to that success have always been due to people in my life, whether or not it be Justice Hans Lindy, whether or not it's my wife, Susan Cohen, who day in and day out makes my life so much better in so many ways. But you know, if you just look at the arc of my career, I'm 76. So many people have worked with me and invested in me, and I've learned from them. And so, no, I didn't go to Harvard, and I didn't have that pedigree, but I came from a family that believed in hard work, and if you're knocked down, you get up and you go back. And so with that work ethic and serving with people like Justice Hans Lindy, terrifying at the beginning, and at the end, we were very close friends. I do think, though, he told me many times that I was a clerk different than all the others. And I'd like to think that was the compliment.
Did you ever clarify which way that comment's going?
Sometimes it's best to leave well enough alone. You know what I mean?
When I was in law school, it felt like every professor was trying to imitate, some quite successfully, Professor Kingsfield in the movie The Paper Chase.
Mm-hmm.
You had to be ready to be grilled in class on anything in the assigned reading, including footnotes.
Mm-hmm.
You feared being humiliated in front of your fellow students. And you would no more question anything the professor said than an Army recruit would challenge a drill sergeant. Are fear and intimidation still the cornerstones of a legal education?
I don't think so. I think we've moved in the opposite direction. I never felt comfortable with that kind of approach to legal education, although in my early years in law school, there were some professors like that, and we just went along with it. But I believed in the Socratic approach. I would begin a class and I'd lecture for 10 minutes, a 90-minute class, I'd lecture for 10 minutes. And the rest of the time, it was Socratic, but not Socratic intimidation. It's like, let's have a dialogue, I'm more interested in the process, that give and take, than I am in particular results. I mean, obviously, some results are better than others, right? You have to know the rule against perpetuities or whatever, however you know about the dormant commerce clause. But I never felt the need to intimidate students, and I tried to make them as relaxed as possible. On the other hand, I was not a big fan of people who passed. The point today in education is, just calling on students is sometimes seen as objectionable. So I think in some respects, and everybody's so offended by everything, and I don't mean to be insensitive, but I do think that there's something to be said about being responsible, being engaged, and not being intimidated. And so that was the balance I tried to strike. And by and large, I think my students appreciated it. I was very touched on some of my constitutional law classes. The last day, they gave me a beautiful copy, a bound copy of the Constitution, and all of them signed it or wrote something.
Oh, wow.
By and large, most of the comments were very touching. There were a few that I thought the students exercised too much of their First Amendment rights, but that's how it goes.
You have a well-deserved reputation as an expert on the Constitution and the First Amendment. Teaching the Constitution is not like teaching tax law, where there are rules, not concepts. For most of us, con law was the organic chemistry of law school. What was it like from the perspective of a teacher?
Well, it depends on what you're teaching. Teaching something like federal courts is really kind of an esoteric sort of thing. My approach to education, whether it be, I taught contracts, criminal law, constitutional law, First Amendment law, jurisprudence, and I taught sales a couple of times as well. But for me, it's the process. It's that give and take. It's what I call ping pong. Let's play ping pong, right? Let's start with a proposition. Okay, let's start with the law, all right? And then here's a hypothetical. How would you deal with it? And for me, it's like, how do you open the mind, right? How do you engage the mind? And so, actually, some of the courses I enjoyed most were code courses, like tax is a code course. And students sometimes just, oh my God, reading a code is so boring and so, terrible. But, you start with the code, its words, then you develop it. It teaches you how to work with language and so on. So for me, whether or not it was teaching constitutional law or contracts or sales, the objective was always engage the mind, and not in an intimidating way. I don't know how much of that is still possible in today's atmosphere when everybody is so easily offended. And I don't mean to sound insensitive, but
I'm trying to be a grown-up and not remain shocked over the fact that you could say pass when called upon in class. I mean, you might as well just, in my world, if you said pass, you might as well just stand up and walk out and you were done.
Yeah, it's like I want to pass on life, and I listen. I understand that certain people are more hesitant or shyer, but you are in law school, right? So if if you're in the water and there are sharks around, you know how to swim, right? So but by and large, I enjoyed the experience. I'm glad I'm not teaching now. For a variety of reasons. For one thing, I don't miss grading exams, and there's just too many other things I want to do in life.
When you're using the phrase pass, you're talking about asking someone a question in class, and they pass on answering the question?
The response is pass, meaning I don't want to respond. And I would ask students, I would tell students, if you feel that way, or let's say you come to class and you're sick or somebody in your family has died. Listen, I'm not inhuman. I'm not insensitive. I just ask, come to class before me and tell me. And that way you won't have to embarrass yourself and we'll move on. But if you just want to, and I tried whenever possible to ask questions and rather than ask particular people, and I would say to folks, in terms of the exam, the worst thing is if you're silent, because the more we play ping pong in class, the more you'll understand what the exam's going to be. And I would tell them when the exam comes, you can bring whatever you want. I don't care. You can bring your notes. You can bring outlines. You can be treatises. I don't care, because what I'm going to ask you is, not what year was the UCC, Uniform Commercial Code, written, but I'm going to ask you questions,
So you were trying to teach people how to think.
Yes, right. And I to me, ever since I, first studied political philosophy in college, I was so taken by the Platonic dialogues because they're all about conversation, and I just fell in love with that idea of engaging the mind.
This really puts a lot of pressure, what you just said, on a person asking questions. That's all I'll say. Did your reputation lead people to call you for advice when they felt that one of their rights, say freedom of speech, had been jeopardized? I was thinking about a story you once told about your brother.
Yeah, right. My beloved brother, Michael. So, yeah, there was a time when my brother had a little episode with a police officer in the dark of the night when he was speeding too fast in his 500 horsepower Cadillac, and, he told the officer what he thought. And the officer said, I bet you'd like to punch me in the face. And my brother said, I have to be as stupid as you are. And of course he was arrested and charged, phony charge and what have you. And so he called me up and he said, I'm just exercising my First Amendment right. And that is the First Amendment right. I mean, it's imprudent, but it's the First Amendment right. And of course, I got on his case. I said, "How could you be so stupid?" And he said, "I can't believe you're saying this, as given all you pontificate on the First Amendment." And I said, "Yeah, but there are certain times when it's best. The sounds of silence are the best ones, And anyway, when it was all said and done, and $10,000 later, he prevailed. But and I think the takeaway from that is just because you have a right to do something doesn't mean it's the right time to do it, right? I mean, you could go up to a police officer and use foul language. That's your right to do it. I wouldn't recommend it for any variety of reasons. This is generally speaking. Mm-hmm. And I think that and as Simone Weil, the French political activist and philosopher who died in 1943, said that something has to be said for a certain degree of respect for other people. And just because you have a right to do something doesn't mean you should do it, right? And I think as a culture, I think we're too rights obsessed. We think more about rights and not about obligations. Yes, we have rights, but the only way those rights become viable is if we respect, the rights of others. If we realize that we have certain obligations to people as people, And so when I look at a police officer, for example, I don't include certain individuals in Minneapolis. But when I look at a police officer, I don't think of him or her as simply a police officer. They're human beings like us. They're doing jobs, they're protecting us. And certainly our police here in Lewes, for whom I have enormous respect. And I've always found them to respect the First Amendment rights of individuals. But I do think as a culture, and maybe this sounds strange as someone who spent so much time in life teaching constitutional law and the Bill of Rights, I think we're too obsessed with rights, and we don't think enough about obligations. And I think that's where respect comes in.
For me, at times, it seems that the law I learned at law school, the law I utilized in my practice, has changed. What was once actionable or possible no longer is, such as trying to protect a patent or a copyright when a large international conglomerate is involved. Is this true for the rights enshrined in the Bill of Rights?
Well, first of all, as a general proposition, law is what we the people make it, right? So many countries have beautiful constitutions with beautiful declarations or bills of rights, but they mean nothing. They're just empty words, on a piece of paper. So it's not just the words. The words are important, all right, obviously, but it's what we the people, what those in government, what those wearing black robes, what the rest of us do with it. And times are cyclical. Tyranny rears its head, whatever the Constitution may say, time and again. And I think we're in a time when there's some serious attacks, very serious attacks on our Constitution. And I say that not only when it comes to questions like Bill of Rights questions, and I think there are a number of attacks on those, but also in the structure of government. For example, I think today Congress is far too deferential to the executive. It's often said that we have a co-equal three branches of government. That's not true. It's just simply not true. If you look at the Constitution, if you look at the words, they're not co-equal. Article 1, the legislative power is the prominent power, right? The executive power pales in comparison to that. Members, the Congress can impeach the president. The president cannot impeach the Congress, right? And so when you talk about the Constitution, you're talking about a structure and rights. And I think, and in this constitutional and democratic republic, you have to look at the whole package. And so, yes, it is. Times change. Heraclitus, nothing endures but change, And we go through these cycles, and it takes courageous people, whatever their ideological stripes, to stand up and defend those rights that our forefathers and foremothers so struggled to first create and then preserve. And it's our obligation, I think, to preserve those rights. So, yeah, law is a fluid process. It changes. The times change, and the law adapts in its own way to those changes. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I had a fun answering it.
The right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness can be found in the Declaration of Independence, not the Constitution or federal law. Why weren't they included?
Let's start with Jefferson's Declaration. There's something very important missing from that line. And if you'd read for those of us who have read the Declarations of Rights of 1776, and you've read Locke and those others, property was considered a very important right. It was seminal. It was first and foremost, in many ways more important than the First Amendment. So when Jefferson wrote, the lines that he did, why did he put in the pursuit of happiness and not property? Well, in the original Declaration, I'm looking forward in this 250th anniversary of the Declaration to giving some lectures on it. But South Carolina, he originally had a line in there about slavery, and South Carolina and some of the other states, colonies rather, objected to it, and so he took it out. But I found it fascinating that he didn't use the word property, because if he used the word property, that would have included slaves. And so my guess is that he did a little what we call slip and slide today. And now, of course, when the Constitution is written, things change, but the whole slavery question still remained in it. And it's not until Madison and others draft up the Bill of Rights that the property clause finds its way back in there. But, the Declaration is, by and large, at least the prologue anyway, is aspirational, right? The Constitution is more functional, more pragmatic. That it's a time for Tom Paine and Thomas Jefferson to move on, and we need Hamilton and others to kind of help us with the structure of the government.
It's interesting to note that in the Declaration, the right was the pursuit of happiness,
right,
not happiness.
Right.
Did the founders believe that the latter was a step too far?
It's always hard to say what the founders believed, Not that historical evidence isn't important, but it's hard to say what they believed. But I like the word pursuit, because life is struggle. If you take struggle out of the equation, you just don't have life, right? And to pursue something isn't necessarily the same as securing it, right? And this gets back to my whole thing about engaging people, discourse, right? And so I like that. I like the idea of pursuit. You kind of pursue it. Maybe you'll get it. Maybe you won't, right? But what's important is when you roll the dice, as it were, what's more important is the roll, not the reward. And I think, and so I could see Jefferson, the idea of pursuing something. He's saying, I invite you to pursue it. Pursue freedom, pursue liberty, pursue equality, pursue, if you will, happiness. But happiness is not the same as property. So however many times I read the Declaration, it wasn't until recently I'd been reading the state declarations of rights and I've been reading about Locke and those who followed him. And the word property and property and property came up again and again and again. And as we see, it continues to this day to be an important right.
There are legally recognized limitations on free speech, such as speech that incites imminent lawless action, threats, obscenity, defamation, or fraud. Do these limitations apply to speech on TikTok, Facebook, or Instagram?
If the government is regulating them, yes.
But if you knowingly post a lie about someone else on Instagram, include a picture of the person, that is never the basis of an action, it seems.
Oh, no, it can be. Certainly it can be an action for defamation. I mean, as long as the government isn't involved. I mean, if I write something false about you, all right, I don't, whether or not I do it with malice or negligent, it doesn't matter. I'm still liable to you. I mean, we too often forget that the Bill of Rights and the Constitution, except for slavery, require government action, right? And so, but if I defame you, I invade your privacy, what have you, of course I'm liable. Now, whether or not that becomes viable in court is another matter. But certainly, those torts or civil wrongs continue to exist. Now, suing somebody like, but there's also, I should say, and this is particularly true with the internet, there's certain statutory rights that internet providers have been given that makes them largely immune from liability.
Is there an inherent legal right in the Constitution to not be offended?
Thank God, no. Thank you, Lord. I mean, think about it. The First Amendment was meant for people who offend others, right? I mean, Lord, I say that with a little bit of jest, of course, but you don't protect speech that offends nobody, right? Right? If you speak and you say it's a sunny day, you're not offending anybody. I don't think. So that's not why we had the First Amendment. We had the First Amendment to protect people who offend others, whose political views, whose religious views, whose environmental views, whose views on property, what have you, whose views on race or gender, what have you. That's why the First Amendment is there. And we have to be, tolerant. Now, just because we tolerate something doesn't mean that we have to endorse it. I may tolerate somebody's right to engage in racist speech, but I certainly wouldn't support it. I would certainly do everything in my power to oppose it. And so, if you're that easily offended, then what are you doing in life, right? I mean, if anything, I think we've produced a generation of young people that are just too easily offended, too easily slighted. And again, I don't mean to be insensitive to those who have been the victims of abuse, to LGBTQ people who've been the victims of abuse, to women who've been the victims of verbal abuse and what have you, to people of color. All right, I don't mean to in any way show any sympathy at all to those people who engage in racist or homophobic slurs. That they have a right to do something, I may recognize that right. I may tolerate it, but I certainly don't approve it, and I do everything in my power to condemn it.
Recently, you were instrumental in the creation of a unique event with Congressman Jamie Raskin discussing Tom Paine's seminal work, Common Sense. How did this happen?
Well, if Tom Paine were alive today, his name would be Jamie Raskin. I've known Jamie. I'm still getting used to calling him congressman, but I knew him back when we were both at American University. I was visiting there, and he was a faculty member there on the law school. And I knew him then, and believe it or not, Jamie and I have had some different views, not many, and as time goes on, fewer and fewer. And we've had some, robust exchanges, but I've always found him to be just brilliant, passionate, and like a modern day Tom Paine. And I had, so when I realized that the 250th anniversary, January 10th, of the publication of Common Sense was coming up, he was in Delaware several months ago, and I asked him, I said, would you be willing to come? And I'm pretty sure I knew the answer, engage in a dialogue with me about Common Sense. He said, yeah, and he said, just get it on my calendar. Well, it took months and months and months and months to get it on his calendar. And it did. And by the way, just today, just a few hours ago, the YouTube recording of that.
Oh, it's now available?
Yeah, on the Lewes Public Library site on YouTube. But what a magic moment. And, I live for those moments. I really do. I mean, I knew that the audience would be moved if I asked him to recite some lines, which he knows by memory, from Common Sense and The American Crisis. And he did. And I was just watching it again this morning, and it was just magical. And I'd live to create those moments. And so for me, it was just a great honor. And what a way to celebrate, Tom Paine and that incredible work that man wrote at a pinpoint in time when the nation was divided. I mean, we all think that all of the colonists, and by the way, Delaware was not. It just barely became the 13th colony, right? I mean, at the time, I don't think at the time when Tom Paine wrote Common Sense, I don't think Delaware is yet a colony. It's still part of Pennsylvania. So we just squeaked in as one of the 13. But I just thought that at the time, colonists were so divided. A number of them were still loyal to the king and to the mother country. A number of them thought, going to war with England is like insane, right? A number of them thought even if we did prevail, Spain or France or some other country would take us over. So there was real division, all right? And then Paine comes along and writes Common Sense. This guy that collected taxes and was a corset maker in England, and gets here through his friend Ben Franklin, who he met in England. And he writes Common Sense, and all of a sudden, the spark ignites a fire, And God, I would have loved to be around on January 10th, 1776, when the pamphlet was released, and I'd like to see the streets of Philadelphia. And so for me, working with Jamie was a way of channeling that spirit, that ethos. And like I said, I live for those moments.
It really was an amazing event. Tom Paine was a man who really benefited from some First Amendment rights, because he had a knack of irritating people. After winning them over, he would then irritate them. Is that fair?
There's a line, tell your boss what you think of him and the truth will set you free. First, I don't know who said it, but I love the line. I just loved it. Tom Paine was my kind of guy in the sense that he knew how to move people in both directions, And so when he writes Common Sense, he pisses off the folks in England, in the mother country. And then and he does it again when he writes American Crisis. But then when he writes At the Age of the Enlightenment and his attack on, and I emphasize, organized religion, he fell out of grace with the colonists. And then when he supported the French Revolution, both the Brits and the John Adams types hated him for that. Of course, what did the French do? They put him in jail. And when Tom Paine died, they wouldn't bury him in a Christian cemetery. And finally, when he was buried, his bones were dug up. And to this day, we don't know what happened. That's the price one pays, or one might pay, for robust speech. But thank God that there are people like Paine, who stand as exemplars. I think it's outrageous that we don't have a monument to him in Washington, D.C. Now, Congressman Raskin has been working on that for a long time. And
what is the political impediment?
Teddy Roosevelt and a lot of others just didn't like Tom Paine. And at the end, Adams didn't like him either. And, he's kind of one of those founders that they just didn't know what to do with, right? He was before Jefferson, before the Declaration of Independence, before the Constitution, before the Bill of Rights, there was Tom Paine, right? What would have happened if you took Tom Paine out of the equation? What would have happened? It's hard to say, but thank God, he was there. And it was just one of those pinpoints in time when all of the stars aligned and the sky opened and the grace from above, shone its light on the colonies. And it was an incredible moment. And okay, I get it that he offended people, but I'd take him over Adams any day.
You've written scholarly articles for the law reviews of Harvard, Stanford, University of Chicago, Michigan, the Supreme Court, and I know there are others. But in the winter of 2010, you were selected as a Norman Mailer Fellow in Fiction Writing. I don't think John Grisham has that honor. Is there a Ron Collins version of Armies in the Night in the works?
Well, like some of the other things, I applied for that fellowship on a lark. It's the same way I applied to the Supreme Court. The same thing. It's like, I don't know that I was serious about it. Why not? And when I was in 1967, age 18, I tried out for the dating game. Got on that too.
You got on the whoa, wait a minute. I mean, we've been doing something fascinating and seriously and intellectually just wonderful, but you're on the dating game?
Yeah.
Were you asking, or were you one of the three?
Oh, by the way, Susan, my beloved wife, Susan Cohen. Susan, I apologize. I know you don't want to hear the story again. So no, it was the summer of '67. I just graduated from Pius X High School, and some friends of mine had tried out for. We lived in Southern California. They tried out for the dating game, and they didn't make it, but they recommended me, and so I tried out. I had 3 interviews, and I went on, and I was dating Michelle Montleone at the time, my girlfriend, and I told her about it, and she was okay with it. She came and sat in the audience. And anyway, the time came and the question was, Bachelor number 2, what's your favorite sport and why? And without thinking, I said, tennis is my racket and sometimes I score love, which means you don't score. And the audience applauded, and 2 things happened at that moment in time. I got the date, and Michelle Montleone, and Michelle, if you're listening to this, please, I would have never done it if I knew you were going to leave me. She never, ever spoke to me again.
Really?
To this day, she will not speak to me. But, so anyway, but like so many other things, getting back to your question, so many other things, you just kind of on a whim, I don't know. And this was one of them. And so I got to, for a month or so, actually stay at his house in his room in Provincetown. And the ideas for my next book, which I just finished, a novel called Forbidden Freedom, were some of them crafted there. I'm almost done with a collection of short stories called I Take My Chances. And some of those began there. And then the second novel, Mother's Day, which is about half done. So this was a couple of decades ago. And they'd just been sitting on the back burner for decades. And so now I don't plan to write any more books on the First Amendment. I want to spend my time finishing, Forbidden Freedom is done. It's presently pending for consideration at a couple of publishers. And the short stories will, I guess, in April or May go out. And then I'll return to Mother's Day and try to finish that. So I want to move into the world of fiction. And so it started thanks to the Norman Mailer Fellowship. Mailer was an incredibly talented writer. I think as a person, he could be an ass at times. He wasn't quite my kind of guy, but a powerful writer nonetheless. And so I was really quite privileged to have that honor and that opportunity.
You and I had coffee a week or 2 ago at Notting Hill.
Mm-hmm.
And we were walking out, and there was a man holding the door for us, which was very nice, pontificating about Woody Guthrie.
Mm-hmm.
You got into a discussion with him that was just absolutely fascinating. And I think for a person who viewed himself as the authority on Woody Guthrie, he was a little taken back that you knew a lot more.
My life would not be what it is without music. I mean, I'd live for it. I mean, and if you haven't heard the latest Bruce Springsteen song on the streets of Minneapolis, you've got to hear it. It's just a beautiful, incredible protest song. But whether or not it's Springsteen or Sondheim, Mailer, Maria Callas, Bob Dylan, oh mama, can this really be the end? Once upon a time, I dressed so fine, threw a bum a dime in my prime. I live for those sorts of things, and so music has always been an important part of my life, and Bob Dylan had an enormous impact on my life. And then, of course, from Bob Dylan, I learned about Woody Guthrie, and a friend of mine, Steve Pressman, has a documentary coming out on Woody Guthrie. I think it'll be out sometime this summer. It's an incredible documentary. And so, This Land Is Your Land. Wow, what a song. I mean, what a powerful song, or his song about immigrants, And so I was. Music is so much a part of my life. I can't. Along with reading and writing, those are the three: reading, writing, music. I could give up meat. I could give up milkshakes. I can give up a lot of stuff, but I couldn't give up chocolate, music, writing, and reading. Those are and of course, love.
What is the singer-songwriter series?
Yeah. So, as you know, along with the amazing Jen Mason, some years back, we're going on 10 now, we co-founded the History Book Festival, which has been an enormous success, thanks largely to people such as Jen Mason. Again, I can't emphasize my respect for that woman or for that friend. Rebecca Lowe, Susan Kehoe, and others. I mean, the success is just beyond what I could have imagined. But there comes a time when one has to move on, and I never wanted to be like an old rock star that sings songs, that they should have stopped singing 20 years earlier. And so for me, there came a time when I thought, it's time for me to move on and to do other things and to leave that enormous responsibility to others and to younger or to others, just let's put it that way. And so the singer-songwriter, if you think about history, right, that's reading, that's writing, that's books, that's my world, right? And I just needed somebody to work with, and Jen and Susan Kehoe and the remarkable Rebecca Lowe, with whom I work with a lot at the library. That woman is, all three of those women are just amazing. So I thought, well, let's start the singer-songwriter series, and the emphasis is on songwriting, right? And so I got together with my friend Paul Sparrow, amazing, Paul's amazing. His knowledge of music is amazing. And we used to work together at the Freedom Forum in Washington, D.C., so I knew him for a long time. So we started this, and we got Bobby Tomberlin, a noted Nashville singer, and we want to talk about the process of songwriting, what goes into that process, and then some singing afterwards. And so we started off with Tomberlin, and then we had an event on Rodgers and Hammerstein, and we've got some pretty incredible ones coming up. And so this, along with the Shine a Light series, which has nothing to do with music, which we just had an event last night, which is I'm working last night with Sally Boswell, this series of events to bring state and local officials to have them engage with the press, the print and the television press, to talk about and to make transparent what's going on in government. And so I'm doing the singer-songwriters series with Paul Sparrow and with Sally Boswell and others. I'm doing a Shine a Light series. And that's all about free speech and open government. These are the things I live for. So,
are you able to today do things that you've always wanted to do, but you were a little restrained because you were teaching or you had to write the law review journal and things of that sort? These all seem to be very connected and very much a part of who you are.
Well, although my last law review article was a month ago.
Oh, well, I'm sorry.
I don't know how that happened.
But wait a minute. If your last law review was a month ago, that means you probably wrote it, 3 years ago, 2 years ago?
I wrote it 11 years ago, and it just been kind of sitting dormant, and it needed some updating. And I was asked to write for the Free Speech Journal, which is edited by Professor Eugene Volokh and others, and that's a great honor. And so since I had something, I did it. But somebody once said there's two things wrong with legal writing. One is style, and the other is content. And so I'm kind of done with that. Been there, done that. Not that I don't have respect for that sort of thing, but so now that I'm retired and I'm not grading exams and I'm not writing boring law review articles, I'm busier than I've ever been. Sometimes I just don't have enough time to just read the daily emails and think about the various projects I'm involved in. But I'm having a wonderful time. The 3 works of fiction are taking a lot of time. The singer-songwriters series, the Shine a Light series, the First Amendment salons. I've just done my 500th posting of First Amendment news, which is a blog supported by FIRE, the Foundation for Individual Rights for Expression. And that was my last column. It's been 15 years, 500 posts. Time to move on. So I try to kind of walk away from other things where I think I've said my due and move on to new things. And, I think my wife sometimes is concerned that I'll have a new idea because I'm already spread pretty thin. And there's also other obligations when one is married. And so it's not all about me. So.
Why did you choose to move to Lewes?
A dear friend of ours, Mimi Major, came here 20-some years ago, maybe more. And she was kind enough to let us come and stay for a week. And I always enjoyed it. And as the years passed, might have been that I overstayed my welcome, like, Ron, when you've been coming here so often, Anyway, there was a place that, at some point, maybe about 12 years ago, we thought about, moving here. And the grande dame of all things real estate in Lewes, among others, but I'm talking about Leanne Wilkinson, pointed out a place to us. And the first place we looked at didn't work. But the second place was just perfect. By that time, I'd already been seeing so many things about Lewes that I liked. And Lewes just struck me as a community with enormous potential. And as I got to know people like Rebecca Lowe and Jen Mason and Susan Kehoe and others in this community, I just saw that the ability to create community. And, Dr. King had a book called Where Do We Go From Here, Chaos or Community? And I picked community. And I thought, and I think now this city, this town has been blessed in so many ways. I mean, first there's the environment that we live in, and there's a real sense of community here. There's a real sense of dedication, and other caring, whether or not we're talking about St. Peter's or the Seaside Jewish community or the Chamber of Commerce with Betsy and her colleagues. By the way, another really important figure in this town. And then there's our new mayor, Amy Marasco. And you put them all together and there's an ability to make magic. And I think whether or not it's Lewes and Bloom, the History Book Festival, the Singer-Songwriter Series, the 250 Committee, working with Mary Alice Kelly as well, the opportunity to create community in this town is just enormous. Does this mean that we don't have our struggles? Yeah, we do. Does this mean that development and traffic isn't an issue? It is. But one of the things I just love about this community, and in so many ways, whether or not it's people in politics or religion or environment or what have you, and let me get a shout out to People to Preserve the Park, the enormous things that they've been doing to protect Cape Penelope State Park, and it's been an honor just to be a small figure in that group. But whether or not it's Lewes and Bloom or People to Preserve the Park or what have you, there's a sense of community here, and I live for that. I mean, I just love it. I love interacting with people from different backgrounds, different persuasions, and so long may Lewes live. It's an honor to live here. And I love so much working with so many people in this community, and there's names I've left out, I will say this though. And it's something I was just talking with some folks about last night at dinner at Rose and Crown. I guess, can I say that if I'm here in Kindle?
Yes, you may.
Just never know. That obviously there's a serious concern in this town about development, about runaway development, and what have you. And I get it. It's a problem. But I think there's too much just blindsided animosity and division, and there has to be some way to find common ground between those who want to preserve this community and those involved in development. My parents developed property, so I get it. I mean, I get that people have a Fifth Amendment right to the property. I understand that. But I understand that with that right comes a certain obligation. And I'm looking forward, and maybe through the Shine a Light series, that maybe we can have some civil discussion with developers and real estate agents and say, can we find some common ground? All right. We don't want to take your property. On the other hand, we don't want you to be irresponsible, right? And just have all sorts of runaway development. And I think that's one of the major challenges facing this town. But I don't demonize developers or real estate agents. I mean, someone like Leanne Wilkinson, yeah, the woman sells real estate, but she's been she's been very philanthropic to so many organizations in this town. And I don't demonize people simply because they sell real estate or they develop land. Now, there are times when I'm going to take issue with them. I'm going to say, look, we can't go there. Our streets this is not fair. We don't have the educational, finances and what have you that we need, whatever. But that's the one part of living in Lewes that concerns me. And I do hope that we can find some common ground and get past the we, them sort of thing. Them, they're the terrible developers. We were the righteous, informed ones living, by the way, in places that they've created.
They built, right.
So anyway, that's my little First Amendment riff for today.
When you mentioned this earlier, when you were younger, did you appreciate the role serendipity would play in your life?
No, I did. Well, let me put it this way. In some respects, my life as it now exists didn't begin until my first year in college, when I took a class from Michael Ormond on political philosophy and started reading Plato's Republic. I'm like, wow, what a mind opener that was. But growing up, so much of my life involves imagination. So you guys are old enough to remember that there were once these places called hobby shops, hobby stores, and they sold models, and they had model car contests, and you'd build a model, and I walked by, and they have first place, second place, third place. So, I built a model in the first year or two, nothing happened, didn't even get 10th place. But one year I made something that got second place. And then the next year it was first place. And I used to go, and they put the models along with the ribbons and what have you in the window for, a month. I would just come by and just stand there and look at it. I wouldn't say anything. I wouldn't say, that's my model. But I was so, I don't know. And it gave me a chance to be, creative. And so it started off with building model cars, and then building slot cars. Also, a part of me, I should say, with some hesitation, but I know more about NASCAR and drag racing and can tell you what a 426 Hemi is, and Doug's headers are. So there was a time in my life I was also involved in drag racing, legal drag racing, that is. And then when my first letter to the editor, my first publication was a letter as a tribute to Ed Sullivan, as strange as that may seem. I was actually because of my parents, a chance to meet Ed Sullivan. And as a young boy, I was just like, wow, And so just on a whim, I'd never written a letter to the editor or anything like that. I wrote a letter to the Los Angeles Times on Ed Sullivan, and they published it. And I thought, wow, that's cool. And I wrote a couple of other letters. And then I don't know how it happened, but I wrote an op-ed on Jimmy Carter and sent it off to the Chicago Tribune, and 2 months went by and nothing happened. And then one day in the mail, I got this clip, and it was in the Sunday edition. And it's like, wow. And I thought, maybe being a writer isn't such a bad thing, And so I started doing more and more writing. I think I've written about, 250 newspaper pieces. I don't do it as much anymore. Been there, done that. But, and then there was a time when, a number of my things were running in the New York Times and others. And the more I got involved in writing, and I would go into a bookstore and say, I just can you recommend a book just for me to study for style? And so sometimes I would read books that I didn't have any interest in the topic, but I was interested in the style. And when I started reading Allen Ginsberg's Howl and Jack Kerouac's On the Road, I thought, wow. And so now I see myself more as a writer than anything else.
Ron, I can't thank you enough for talking with us today. Your knowledge of the Constitution and the law is as impressive as it is extensive. But I knew that going in. I had no idea what a marvelous teacher you must have been. God, I wish I had a couple of professors like you in law school. And I also didn't know you were on the dating game and loved drag racing. Who knew?
I would like to thank you in return. And thank you so much for having me. And it's so much. I mean, what you're doing is all a part of the First Amendment, right? You're like the press and speech, and here we are. And so I actually appreciate that. And when you thank me, it also reminds me of my mother, Yolanda Cons, my late mother, who, though Italian, grew up in Guatemala. And when somebody would thank her, she would say, "El gusto es mío," meaning the pleasure is mine. So thank you.
Thanks again to our friends at the Chamber for their support, and of course to the Lewes Library, who have awarded you the honor of being their distinguished lecturer. Steve wanted me to ask if that position comes with the appropriate accoutrements, like a robe with gold stripes, a scepter, a jeweled tippet. And dear listeners, thank you for joining us today. We're a little late getting off the mark this year. We could blame a lot of things, but we're going to blame it on the weather. It's been a little tough to get around town this January if you don't ice skate. Until next time, from our headquarters here in the heart of downtown Lewes at the beautiful Beloved Bar in Kindle, this has been We in Lewes, the podcast. See you on the streets.